So just jumping back, I don't want to forget to go over this, because if you're still sitting there, like some people are, unfortunately, I've had some trouble on Facebook with folks like that. I don't care if you believe her or not, if you think that he was totally entitled to jump on top of her or whatever bullshit, that sort of shit that I hear. Oh, it's not, ugh. He is rotten and should not be on the Supreme Court for the following reasons. Kavanaugh would tear down Thomas Jefferson's wall of separation between church and state. He praised jurisprudence that pervasively criticized Jefferson's metaphor of a strict wall of separation between church and state. Kavanaugh argued that the Supreme Court should allow the machinery of the state, our public schools, to be used to proselytize to students. Let that sink in.
Yeah.
He thinks that prayer, open prayer in school, should be. It's not like we have right now with the moment of silence, the thinly veiled no church. And yeah, he wants it to be outright.
And to be clear, if a student voluntarily chooses to do that, a student can do that at any time. There's no law that says a student can't pray in the lunchroom or the library or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And let me guess, Kavanaugh is probably not in favor of, okay, it's Monday, we're going to have Muslim students lead a prayer, and today we're going to have the pagan students lead a blessing to the goddess.
No.
No,
this is not going to happen on his watch.
And the atheist students can get up and talk today. No,
right.
They're talking
let's have a
about
secular thing.
One religion.
Yep, right. Just the one that they believe in, and specifically is Catholic. So you know what that'll mean to Roe versus Wade, and. Yeah. Okay.
And birth control.
Oh, and birth control. Yes, because we're going to get to that too. Yes. Right. Okay. So he has all but explicitly stated that he would overturn the central test that courts use to strike down violators of state-church separation, the Lemon test. This is the test codifying longstanding precedent, says that a government action is unconstitutional if it, 1, doesn't have a secular purpose, 2, advances or inhibits religion, or 3, entangles the government with religion. Those are important things. They should not be ditched.
They're uncontroversial things.
Yeah.
I mean, people aren't struggling with these concepts.
Right.
Except for people like Kavanaugh.
Right. What they always fail to think about is, what if your religion was not the primary religion of this country? Then would you be cool with these things?
Of course not.
Exactly.
Of course not. It's all about privilege, and yes.
Let me tell you, most of the people that are at least nominally in support of him, if their particular flavor of Christianity were marginalized, they would not be in favor of this.
Right.
Their heads would explode. So my question is, for people who are, let's say, Southern Baptists, are you going to be cool when Catholic doctrine becomes
they'll teach evolution in school because the Pope is cool with evolution. Are you cool with that?
And not only that, but Kavanaugh went to a Jesuit high school, and they're actually pretty well known for providing a good science education. So
yeah, right? Oh, my gosh, yes. So tread lightly.
Yeah.
All right. He fought to uphold vouchers for private religious schools in Florida. This is a problem because when you have vouchers, they go much more, what's the word I'm looking for? They're much more likely to go to schools that are religious because most private schools are religious. That's not cool.
right.
And they tend to benefit schools that don't really need it anyway. How many private schools do you know are struggling in terms of finding, and how many private schools do you know that are not primarily white and Christian? It's not cool.
And that's important because public schools, they have to take anyone in the district. They can't exclude anyone. Not only that, but there's this concept of meeting every student wherever they are, which means if that student has special needs, the student has to accommodate those needs. And
you mean the school has to
yeah, excuse me. The school has to accommodate those needs for that student and basically educate that student. Private schools don't have to do that.
Right.
They can set their own rules for admission. They can set their own rules for where they're going to meet that student. And basically, if they say, okay, this is the limit that we're going to do, then that student has to meet the school where they are, which is a really messed up concept, especially if you're talking about a kid who has some kind of, let's say you have a dyslexic kid.
Right.
A private school does not have to make any accommodations for dyslexia, even though we know there are effective educational strategies that allow those students to thrive. But they can just basically be cast aside. The same thing goes for kids with, ADHD or, any other kind of condition that might cause them to learn differently than someone else.
Kids who've been traumatized. Kids who have PTSD. Maybe they've been abused. Maybe they've been through the foster care system. Those kids need a lot of support. That's expensive. Private schools typically don't provide that unless perhaps to wealthy families.
And when you talk about looking at differences in performance standards between certain private schools and public schools, a lot of times a public school's performance is a proxy measure of the economic status of the parents in that district.
Yeah.
So if you have students who are performing poorly, the odds are the socioeconomic status of the parents is not exactly middle class. Okay, they're working 2 jobs. There's, maybe the kid doesn't have enough to eat or whatever. So you can't compare those two. The other thing is there's a concept in social sciences, and I guess in some of the what they call hard sciences too. It's called creaming the data. That's where you basically take the data that essentially supports what you want it to show, and you only account for that data. You only use that data in your research. Essentially, that's what private schools are doing because they're excluding those students who might potentially bring down the performance standards. They have a creamed population that they're looking at. So by not having these kids that need special help, of course they're going to show better performance standards. It's by design. So, public schools get a bad rap just from that. And people say, oh, our public schools are failing, they're a disaster. They're not. I mean, my kid goes to a phenomenal public school. It is absolutely phenomenal. Every one of the teachers in there, they're fully committed to doing whatever they can to help the students there.
Yeah. I've had the same experience. I put my son and daughters actually into two different private schools, and I can tell you that anybody who wants the voucher system to be used, they have the money to go to a private school. They want their private school fixed in some way, or have the resources. That's so privileged and skewed. Anyhow, we had some good things in the private schools. There were some good aspects to it. But by and large, I have been thrilled with public school because we've gone to public school more recently. They've been, if you find those advocates, and it's a wonderful thing. But they do have to deal with everybody. Everybody. And when we went to the private schools, they were like, you're on your own. I mean, one person essentially blamed me for my son not being able to read. What? Yeah, you're supposed to be teaching him. And they assumed it was something I'd done. Once he got a good teacher, he learned to read in a couple months. Anywho, so yeah. So there's that. That's why we don't think vouchers are cool. That's the very long story. Kavanaugh defends religious privilege while trampling the rights of women. Last year, he argued unsuccessfully, thank goodness, that the government could force a 17-year-old girl detained as an illegal immigrant to continue her unwanted pregnancy. Catholic.
Yeah.
With conditions that essentially would have forced her to carry the pregnancy to term. But to Kavanaugh, that was not an, quote, undue burden on her rights, because he sees women as vessels to provide babies.
Yes.
And once the baby's born, screw taking care of it. But, that unborn child business.
Yeah.
No bodily autonomy there. It's just
Right. And this young immigrant, she was a teenager. She had support from people. She had an attorney.
Mm-hmm.
She had people counseling her. This was her decision. No one was coercing her. She was very clear that she wanted the abortion, and he threw up every roadblock he could to prevent her from accessing a safe, legal medical procedure in this country.
it's legal, y'all.
Constitutionally protected.
Exactly.
Right. And they've tried to stand in the way of it.
Who thinks it's a good idea for a 17-year-old in detention to be forced to carry a child that she doesn't want? Does that make any sense at all?
No, it doesn't. People who don't understand that women are human beings.
In some religious communities, that's the way infertile white Christian couples obtain infants to adopt. So there's quite the little market for that.
Mm-hmm. God bless.
It's gross.
It's abhorrent. Alrighty, and then there's one last little goodie that Kavanaugh is well known for, and Jen already talked about it a little bit. He would allow religious employers to deny women contraception in spite of the Affordable Care Act's contraception mandate because of a 2-page form. The female employee's freedom is what's really threatened, but Kavanaugh twisted the case in defense of the religious freedom of the employer instead. Oh my God. So wrong on so many levels. I just, who is an employer to tell me how to take care of my body?
Well, my question for things like this, because several years ago I worked for a guy that I later found out was a Jehovah's Witness. And so I got employer-provided health insurance through, that company. My question is, if he had said, hey, I'm a Jehovah's Witness, you can't get a blood transfusion if you need it.
Right.
Or any blood products if you need them.
Yep.
Because that violates my religious freedom. Is that cool? I mean, is that what Kavanaugh is going to advocate?
All right.
Or is it just that a woman's body is property and,
It has everything to do with
Yeah.
gender. It has everything to do
Yeah.
with gender. So that's all of the actual news type data and why he is a bad apple.